You're watching CBT News official coverage of the New York Automotive Forum hosted by NADA, JD Power, and New York International Auto Show.
Hey everyone, Jim Fitzpatrick. I'm on location here at the New York Automotive Forum hosted by the NADA, JD Power, and the International Auto Show. And I've got Anu Roberts, who's the Senior Director at CDK. Thank you so much for stopping by CBT News.
Yeah, thank
for
you for
those
having me.
Dealers that were not able to make it out to the event today, tell us a little bit about your presentation.
Yeah, I talked a little bit about the friction points. So we do an annual study.
Okay.
This is our 5th year doing it,
Okay.
and we really take a look at the car buying and selling process.
Okay.
Both from the consumer's perspective and the dealer's perspective.
Okay.
So we have about 1,300 consumers across the generations.
Wow, that's good.
And over 400 dealers, mainly in the sales and F&I roles.
Sure.
And we really, again, year over year, we kind of take a look at where are the biggest gains that we've seen improvements, where are some areas where maybe there's some backsliding,
Right.
and then where are some new things that are popping up.
Okay.
And so the good news is, start with some good news.
Yeah, I was just going to say, let's start with
Good
some good news. Right.
is that consumers are actually going through the car buying process
Okay.
faster in 2 hours or less.
Really?
Which is a really nice.
That's huge for the industry.
Huge for
Yeah.
dealers, really
Yeah.
making gains. And that's
Yes.
up. It was 61% of consumers
Okay.
went through that process 2 hours or less.
Okay.
And that's up year over year from 54%.
Wow.
So a very big gain.
That
and a
really is,
very
yeah.
big, something to really be positive
There's no
about,
question about it,
which
because
is
as you know, it's
wonderful.
the number one complaint that consumers have
Yeah.
about going into a car dealership. Why does it take so long?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so what was some of the other things that jumped out at you?
Well, so there was, that was the good. Now let me talk a little bit about where there
Can't
was
fix a problem that you
right,
don't know about.
Right, exactly. Is, F&I has such a big impact
Yeah.
on the consumer.
Oh, yeah.
And a big part of the study that we focus on is time.
Okay.
So time to complete that purchase.
Right.
Consumers' biggest pain point is all around time. Waiting to
Yeah.
get to do the test drive, waiting to,
Yep.
price negotiation,
Totally.
trade-in, waiting for F&I. And F&I is an area where we saw more consumers wait longer than 30 minutes
Okay.
just to get into F&I.
Okay, wow. That's
And
crazy.
nearly half of the consumers are waiting over 30 minutes.
That's incredible.
And there is a big correlation. We really charted the NPS correlation between consumers that are waiting over 30 minutes. Their NPS can really drop almost in half.
Wow.
So an NPS, as you know, Net Promoter Score, which
yeah.
is the likelihood of
Yeah.
the consumer to recommend
Sure.
the dealership to their friends and family.
right.
It's a gold,
Oh, there's no question.
of a referral and
That's right.
influence that they have.
And it also affects the saleability of the products from the
Yes.
F&I director or the F&I person, because that person comes in so heated now
Yeah.
that they've had to wait so long that they just want to say, I don't want anything. Let's get
Yeah.
out of here.
Exactly.
And that's the last thing that an F&I manager wants to hear.
Right,
Right.
because it's such a key integral part. I mean,
Yeah.
and consumers, they trust the F&I director and manager often
That's
the
right.
most in the
That's right.
dealership.
Yeah,
so it's
that's
a
true.
really influential role. So like you said, let's not get them set up to have a poor experience. And you can really do everything really great up until that point, and
Right.
that just can be such a buzzkill. So
That's
a good area
unfortunate.
for dealers to focus on
Right.
is around F&I.
Any suggestions on how they can change that? More F&I managers,
Yeah.
maybe schedule
Well, I think look at that exchange of process and
Yeah.
see what can be done. One of the things that actually is very helpful is bringing some of those options up earlier
Okay.
in the deal, sometimes online.
Okay.
Present them with menu options,
Okay.
so that you're educating your consumers before they're getting in.
Right.
It actually leads to more F&I dollars.
Yeah.
More sales
Yep.
when you're introducing that education up front. And then that process is a little bit quicker. But really, I would say just there's across the line on wait times is really taking a look at your process.
Yeah.
Because although we had that great news of consumers going through the process faster, if you break down the wait times, actually incrementally increase this year.
Wow.
So it's a little juxtaposed, right? So that really has to do with, well, what are those little areas that are more probably process driven than technology driven. And speaking of technology, we asked, one of the things that we focus on also is, what are the dealer pain points, the biggest dealer pain points, and across F&I managers, directors, sales reps, different roles in the front office. And the common theme there was lack of integration and lack of accurate data.
Okay.
And it really has to do with, data's not flowing in the back end, they're spending time rekeying, there's duplication, there's compliance issues, leads to a lot of inefficient time.
Right.
And so, again, back to, you can have some of the greatest technology, but if it's disjointed, then you're creating a lot of inefficiencies.
That's right.
And what we saw is the amount of systems dealers are using now actually crept up a little bit. So dealers are using more 2 to 3 systems, some are using more 6 to 7 systems, and so really taking a look at how all that comes together is a big pain point.
Yeah, it is. Sure.
Now, a nice bright spot was we took a focus on AI this year.
Okay.
And what we found is when we looked at the overall strategies for dealers in 2025, improving the customer experience remains number one behind focusing on vehicle selection and acquiring vehicles, and the use of digital retailing. Those were the top 3. Those have remained the top 3 year over year. But we saw a bump in dealers really focusing on bringing in an AI-based solution to help with their dealership operations and efficiency.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so we dove in a little bit deeper and we said, okay, well, where are you utilizing that? And about a third of dealers, about 30% of dealers say that they have already incorporated an AI-based solution. And BDC was really kind of out there. It's probably the biggest use case behind sales managers, sales reps, and F&I as well. And then the top applications that we're seeing, how they're actually leveraging AI is AI virtual assistants to help with lead gen and qualification. AI assistants to answer questions, scheduling, targeted marketing, things like that. And we also asked what the biggest impact to AI of these dealers that are actually already utilizing it. And an overwhelming 46% said that it had a really great improved impact in their lead to close ratio.
Wow.
So leveraging tools like AI, and the tools that you have already, like CRM as well, leveraging that to really engage your customers and retain them and manage them.
Which is so vitally important now with all of the craziness that we see, in the automotive space right now. It's all about how to keep that customer for life, basically. And then to your point, how to make that process so much less friction. Make it much more frictionless, I should say, because that's what consumers have been screaming about, right? And you guys at CDK are working on those solutions all the time, right?
Yeah, we're very, our CDK Modern Retail team is very focused on a lot of the things that we talked about in the friction points, making things simpler and really taking a look at how we can reimagine those workflows to really tighten up and eliminate those points of friction and really embedding intelligence, AI, into key points in those workflows and in the journey. We have our AI virtual assistant specifically for lead gen and lead management. We have AI equity mining, really surfacing up those opportunities of who have the greatest propensity to buy. Even in F&I, we're introducing AI predictive forms. So we're really taking a look very selectively about where we can embed intelligence, where we can simplify that workflow, and just make things easier on the whole for both the consumer and the dealer.
That is fantastic. Anu Roberts, Senior Director at CDK. You guys are doing great work for dealers all over the country, for sure. For dealers that want to learn more, go to CDK, CDK.com, CDK Global, right?
Yeah, CDKglobal.com.
These are the kinds of efficiencies that you need in your store. These are the kinds of efficiencies that not only your consumers want, but your staff wants it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just say CDK.com/insights. It has the friction point study. So if you weren't here, then you read the study for yourself.
Right there. So thank you so much
for
stopping by.
Thank you.
Really
appreciate it.
Yeah.